The member for Wide-Bay's time has concluded. The member for Fremantle.
Thank you, Speaker. As an island nation, we rely on merchant shipping and our naval defence to a greater extent than many Australians would consider in their day-to-day lives. Having our own capacity in these areas is a matter of critical self-sufficiency. It's a capacity we should have at all times. It's not something we'd want to find is lacking when a crisis hits. An overwhelming proportion of the goods that Australians import or export is transported by ships, which travel here through a changing and volatile region. In those circumstances, we should all be concerned that our coastal shipping industry is in decline and has been left to wither by a regulatory framework that doesn't accord proper value to Australian shipping and doesn't work effectively to protect the jobs, conditions and safety of Australian seafarers. That means there are very few Australian-owned and flagged vessels. It means we don't maintain sufficient merchant marine capability, and it means there isn't currently an Australian general licence vessel capable of transporting petroleum. And it means our marine environment is at risk of the disasters that are more likely to occur when both ships and seafarers fall below the high standard that our industry has always set. As I noted in the submission I made to the government's coastal shipping discussion paper, the coalition government's record has been to undermine Australian shipping and to actively weaken the position of Australian seafarers and their representatives. Until there is serious and meaningful change to that approach, it is likely that Australia's self-sufficiency will be further weakened and that jobs and skills in those areas will be further reduced. Speaker, with respect to Australia's naval capacity and operations, the government is embarking on a significant shipbuilding program which I support. But it is impossible to support an approach to that program which doesn't maximise the opportunity for Australian industry participation or provide fair opportunities for WA. I'm not some kind of mad parochialist. I understand that national projects and funding have to be shared. I'm glad that South Australia will continue its important role as a shipbuilding hub. What I don't understand is why Western Australia has to be ignored and shortchanged at every turn. And I get particularly frustrated, and my colleagues get particularly frustrated when I hear Western Australian Liberals pretend that everything is peachy keen. We are getting the scraps from the table, and the WA Liberals are smiling and rubbing their tummies. Last week the government released its naval shipbuilding plan, and the neglect of Western Australia was as plain as day. $89 billion of defence manufacturing investment, out of which WA gets barely $4 billion. Yet Senator Reynolds' first response was to blame the WA Minister for Defence Industry, Paul Papalier, because he didn't accept a briefing from the government. And what on earth would a briefing achieve? There's no additional investment or jobs in a briefing. In fact, the report makes clear that with all the work South Australia is getting, there will likely be a workforce shortage in that state. So in addition to the massive shipbuilding imbalance, the report explains that millions will be invested in South Australia to create workforce capability that doesn't currently exist, and workers will be brought in from interstate and overseas to make up the gap. Imagine how disappointing that is when we know Western Australia has those skills and those workers. Yet the Minister for Defence Industry, who's a proud South Australian, can't wipe the smile off his face. He tries to con us in WA into believing that we've got a good deal. The Minister must take us for fools if he thinks we'll be comforted by his repetition of the fact that WA will build 31 of the 54 new naval vessels. The Minister knows very well that the Pacific patrol boats and the offshore patrol vessels represent a tiny fraction of the value and scope of the naval shipbuilding work. Last weekend, the Minister was quoted saying that all non-combatant vessels, that is all the PPBs and OPVs, will be constructed in WA. That simply isn't true. The first two OPVs will be built in South Australia. There's already strong lobbying underway to make it more than two. And it is galling to hear the Minister claim WA isn't equipped to be involved in the build of the future submarines or the future frigates, while he's busy pouring millions and millions of dollars into addressing shortcomings in South Australia. Industry experts argue that a distributed build or block build model could easily enable fabricators and shipbuilders in WA to share in the work on these massive multi-decade projects. It makes a lot of geostrategic sense, but today the Minister continued with the smoke and mirrors. He made a big deal of $100 million in infrastructure for WA, a figure that's been announced and re-announced 3 times. He made a song and dance about 100 apprentices at Austell when he knows the shipbuilding workforce nationwide is expected to be 6,000. He allocates $25 million for new maritime training facilities in South Australia when there are hundreds of skilled and experienced Western Australians out of work, and he has the high to declare WA's a big winner. We are heartily sick of being taken for mugs by the Turnbull government. The numbers don't lie. We're not getting a fair share
Member for
of defence
Fremantle's time
shipbuilding work.
has concluded. The member for Butt.